Critical thinking and critical theory, using complexity to make life simpler. Of course, we have a right to our opinions, but our academic goals are to engage with scholarly evidence and develop the theoretical tools with which to gain a more complex understanding of social phenomena. So let's just pause a minute and think. What we really want to be clear about in this class is that you are entitled to your opinion. Your opinion does not necessarily make you right or wrong. It is just your opinion. And as we look at evidence, as we look at facts, we want to be able to see the facts, understand the facts, analyze them, develop them, grow and understand how they impact our lives. So, this is some vocab that I just would like for you to know as we're talking about this lecture. Ideology. For the purposes of this, an ideology is a set of beliefs. Your ideology is sort of all of your beliefs put into one. So what are the various things you believe? And that set of beliefs that explains how and why you act the way you do. Mr. Kirby, what is your ideology? Well, when I answered that question and I explain that and I talk about that, and I show you what my value system is, I show you what I believe, and I show you how I act, that's my ideology. Critical theory, critical thinking. Here we're talking about the use of the word critical. That means that you're deeply analyzing something. Critical in our popular conversations, in our conversations amongst each other, is often I'm criticizing you, right? I'm critiquing you. That is not this use of the word. This use of the word is about deeply analyzing something. If you're a critical thinker, you deeply analyze and deeply think about whatever the topic is. Critical theory is the way we use critical thinking to approach social issues, social conditions, the historical, the cultural, the ideological context of something. When we apply critical theory, we're looking at all of those, the historical, the societal, the cultural. We're looking at all of those through a lens of deep analysis. Why are things structured the way they are structured? Why are people stratified the way they're stratified? Why do people interact the way they interact? And the next word is social stratification. We want to say that all groups are equal, and in some conditions you may find equality among the groups. But we know that in practice, groups are not equal. We know that there is social stratification. We know that there are groups that are on top of the pyramid, and we know that there are groups on the bottom of the pyramid. And that is social stratification. Social stratification sets up a ranking and a hierarchy of different social groups. So again, social stratification sets up a ranking and a hierarchy of different social groups. Positionality we've talked a little bit about before, but it's just being aware of where you fit in that pyramid. So that's a pyramid I just mentioned, the social stratification pyramid. Positionality is determining where you fit in that pyramid. Where are you in that? There's socially constructed knowledge, and not just knowledge, but all things are socially constructed. It's constructed out of a context. When Europeans began to discover the world, when they began to sail across the Atlantic, we think about Christopher Columbus. It's a good example. We say Christopher Columbus discovered America. Well, when we say that, we've constructed a story. We've used language and we've said Christopher Columbus discovered America. Well, we know now that Christopher Columbus wasn't even the first European to set foot on what would become North America, right? That Vikings beat him to this continent by centuries. We know native peoples were living and had advanced societies on this continent for thousands of years before Christopher Columbus even thought about coming to America. So, but we construct knowledge, and we do this on everything from Christopher Columbus to scientific knowledge. You may say, well, I'm looking out the window and I see a rock. Well, that's true. You see a rock, but we have constructed knowledge around, is that a valuable rock or not? Is that rock worth moving or not moving? Is that rock worth money or not? We set the value of things. We set what's, where it falls in a hierarchy of our understanding. When and by we, I mean people who have won the day, right? You will remember the parable I told on the first day about the foreigner and Hoja and the conversation they had in the sand where they drew all the symbols. Well, if the foreigner has guns and Hoja's people do not, and the foreigner is able to impart his knowledge because he has power, force, ability, if he's able to impart that, then that's how knowledge gets socially constructed. When the foreigner drew the circle and the lines, he thought that the conversation was about the earth and oceans and land masses and water vapor and rain. That's what he thought the conversation was about. And because he has guns and Hoja's people did not, his team won the day, and his team got to write the textbooks. His team got to write the standardized test. His team got to say what is knowledge and what isn't. And there was a time in history where this happened over several hundred years, and it happened quickly and really sort of set a tone. And that time period is known as the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment lasted a couple hundred years. It was a rebuke to the religious knowledge that existed before that, where people sort of lived in a superstitious and religious way. And then all of a sudden with the Enlightenment, reason won the day. But it was the reason of the privileged white male in Europe. It wasn't the myriad of learnings and resources that existed in the Middle East for millennia. It certainly wasn't the tribal knowledge of the various tribes in the Americas. It certainly wasn't the tribal knowledge of the various tribes in sub-Saharan Africa, even though, as we know now, all of those various communities have a lot to offer the academic world. The world we live in now draws deeply from those various communities. And so when we think about the Enlightenment and what we so easily fall into, our understanding of how school works, our understanding of how government works, our understanding of how science works, on and on and on. All of that arose from this Enlightenment period. And that Enlightenment period is really limited to male Europeans of a socioeconomic background. And so finally, positivism is just the idea that comes out of the Enlightenment. It's this idea of this reason and that we have bought into, just the ideas that have sprung from the Enlightenment. So that's some just basic vocab, some basic words that you might hear me say in this lecture or on down the road. And I just want you to be familiar with these words. There are 8 words here, and just be familiar with them and be thoughtful about them as we go forward. So within critical thinking, there are 2 dimensions. The first dimension is myth. The myth here, and we're going to use the example of public education. The myth is that what you study in school is factual and neutral. And that's a myth. What you have learned in K through 8 is certainly not neutral and might be factual depending on what it is, but it's certainly not neutral. Everything you've learned in K8 is somehow shaded by the person who's teaching you and by the content that person is told to teach you. So there's always a bias. You can look at textbook studies around the country, and you can see in California, you can look up in U.S. history textbooks, and see them talk about Native people, and you can see them talk about the Second Amendment as something that is dangerous, looking for gun control. But then the exact same publishing house might publish a textbook in Texas that talks about the power of the Second Amendment and why it's a good thing. It may not say anything about Native peoples, or if it does, it's slanted. You can look at the way it's taught. The Civil War is taught between those 2 textbooks in those 2 different states. In Texas, it may say that the Civil War was a states' rights issue. In California, same textbook, same publishing house will say that slavery was in fact the cause of the Civil War. So I want to quickly say and kind of get you aware of the fact that one of the reasons the main reason we don't use textbooks in my class is because I'm not going to add another layer to this this myth that is existing. We have to be able to see the myth for what it is, and it's not bad and it's not good. Bad and good have nothing to do with this. It is a myth. We just need to see it as a myth and then begin to ask the right questions and how we approach this myth. So this is one of the ways we approach the myth. We have to acquire new information that challenges our knowledge. So you would be reading a textbook, a history textbook, that says the Civil War was a states' rights issue. Well, how can you acquire new information to challenge that knowledge? And in this day and age, when you have at your computer, the entire internet at your fingertips in your phone, to acquire new information is easy. The hard part will be learning how to filter through that information so that you can find better, more accurate, critical analysis, a deeper, more critical analysis of that information. And then you also, to attack these myths, you're going to need to find the meaning. So how does society assign context to the events? And this changes over time. I mean, even in my lifetime, there's been a huge change in the way we view the LGBT community, the way we write about the LGBT community, the way we live and write and talk about the African American experience in this country. So culture and society are not static things that stay the same. They move. They go up and they go forward and progress. And so that is just as important. And again, with your phone at your fingertips and the exposure that you get to memes and the exposures you put on your Instagram stories about various things, Those things happen quickly. And at a certain point, there is a tipping point that tips society into a new understanding of an old idea. And social media has made that trajectory much faster. And this is an example I've given already about Columbus sails the ocean blue, yet many cultures already knew the world was not flat. Columbus and the Europeans, the Spanish in particular, who funded his mission, were like, oh, the world's flat. But if you talk to some of the tribes in uh, the Americas, in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, talk to communities around the world, many of them would tell you they already knew the world wasn't flat. They already knew that the earth circled the sun. They were light years ahead. But that's, often a story that's not told in our K-12 curriculum. And that's because knowledge is socially constructed. So before the Enlightenment, the church kind of dictated reality. The church said what's real and what isn't. And then in the 1700s, the Enlightenment brings forth this reasoning and principles of rational thought, infallibility of close observations. If you observe something close enough, you look at it close enough, and you observe it close enough, then you will have mastered it. They discover natural laws like gravity and principles governing life and society. They come up with democracies and religious freedoms and other rights that we have in our Bill of Rights. So those become the norm. Those become what the world sees as normal, though for millennia, other groups have been doing similar things, different things. It doesn't matter. These became the rubric by which everything else was judged. So the role of marginalized people to kind of help call into question those structures is important. We need to, when we think about that pyramid of social stratification, the people at the top of the pyramid got to construct all of these ideas. And because they got to construct all the ideas look a lot like the people at the top of that pyramid. And so as we can listen to people lower on the pyramid, it becomes a challenge in chipping away at those socially constructed ideas. So whenever you come up with a question like how or why, you're theorizing. You're going to postulate a theory. You're going to come up with a theory. Why is public education essentially the same as it was 150 years ago? Why do textbooks differ from Texas to California? How can public education do better and better serve marginalized students, marginalized districts? I want to read something to you just real quick. Children who attended schools that served primarily poor and working class families often said that knowledge was remembering things, answering questions, and doing pages in your workbooks. Children who attended affluent schools serving primarily upper class families said things such as, you think up ideas and then find things wrong with those ideas. It's when you know things really well and figuring things out. So let me say this again in my own words. Children who attend primarily poor and working class schools think that knowledge is about remembering things, answering questions, and doing pages in a workbook. Students in primarily poor neighborhoods think those three things about knowledge and education: that it's memorization, that it's working in a workbook, and that it's answering questions. We know that's not knowledge. We know that that's a fallacy that we need to overcome. Now, children in affluent neighborhoods, children who live in affluent uh, school districts and have access to affluent schools, answer the same question very differently. They say that knowledge is thinking up ideas and finding things wrong with those ideas. It's when you know things really well and figure things out. Do you see the difference? One is about theorizing, one is about figuring things out, one is about thinking up new ideas and then questioning those ideas to make them even better. And another side is working in a workbook and memorization. That, my friends, is what I want to fight against. There's no reason that you all shouldn't strive for the thinking up new ideas and questioning those ideas, to come up with things and to then try to put them into practice, to really figure things out in a deep, critical way. That's what all of you should be doing. And that is what the purpose of education should be. Instead, you have spent your K-8 time taking standardized testing, right? Many of you probably working in workbooks, many of you probably doing sort of rote memorization. Well, there's a problem with that when we want to talk about critical theory and critical thinking. Because we construct a worldview through these questions. If you grow up in a primarily poor school district and your understanding of knowledge is doing a workbook, your worldview is probably pretty tied to that, right? Your worldview is probably pretty narrowly tracked into that, right? You don't really feel plugged into anything. You certainly don't feel like an engaged citizen. But if your worldview allows you to think of new ideas and think of new concepts and dream up new things, well then, gosh, the world is really open to you. So here are some ways that knowledge is socially constructed, and being aware of this can help us critically analyze this knowledge. Critical analysis claims that are objective or neutral or universal. Always analyze. If somebody is saying that they're neutral, they're probably not neutral. So analyze what they're saying. If somebody says this is universal, it's probably not universal. Think about it. Critical self-reflection on your social perspective. Be aware of who you are and what you come to the table with. Be aware of your own social perspective, right? Doesn't mean you have to be right or wrong. That's not at all what this is about. It is very much about being aware, having the ability to reflect on your actions. And finally, developing the skills with which to see and analyze and challenge ideological domination. Don't let a, a group of people dominate you with their ideology. Don't let a group of people who say, this is the way to believe, force you to believe that way. Ideological domination is the opposite of what we're talking about here. I want you to be able to question and develop the skills to reflect on what leaders are saying to you so that you can come up with your own thoughts and your own perspective and use your own voice to speak out. So let's just unpack what it means to kind of be self-reflective in your position. So it's dependent on multiple factors. One is cultural values, how you're raised, where you're raised. Are you raised religious, non-religious, atheist? or what is your cultural background in terms of where you grew up? Are you a child of an immigrant, or are you not a child of an immigrant? Are you were you born in one state and moved to another? All of these kind of cultural values. That's one thing to take into account. Then the beliefs that you have. So again, religion would fall into that, but also political beliefs, political ideas. Where do you get those political ideas? Where do you get those beliefs? Do you get them from family and friends and TV and books? Where do you get your beliefs from? Then your experiences. What experiences do you have as a person? Are you traveling or going to other countries? If you never left Little Rock, the experiences that you have also help identify your positionality. Social positions. What is your social position? What is a social position that you occupy? Where are you on that pyramid when you think about the primary groups that you belong to? Well, where you're occupied on that pyramid, does that make your friend? Who are your friends because of where you're occupied on that pyramid? So those who we are as Noahs is intimately connected to our group socialization. So who I am as a middle class cisgender white male is greatly connected to the socialization and the group that I belong to. Now, I make a conscious effort to break out of that and try to associate with everybody, but it has to be an effort on my part to do that, because generally speaking, we tend to run with the people who look like us and act like us. What you know equals who you are and where you stand. This idea of socially constructed knowledge, the more that we understand that it's socially constructed, the more we can break free of our little pigeonholed group. To say that another way, if you just buy into the textbooks that they're throwing down your throat, and you're doing the workbooks and you're remembering the facts, like those students in the poor school districts, if you're doing those things, that's going to equal where you stand and who you are. That's going to equal a passive, disengaged, probably disenfranchised individual who is not, who will struggle to connect for various reasons. But if you realize that that's a construct and you can fight against that construct, well, then you can change where you are. You can change what you know. If you know that this is a socially constructed thing, you can begin to question it and poke at it and find fault in it and come up with new ideas and explore why those ideas work or why they don't work, or figure things out. If you do those things, then you open up the positionality that not only you hold, but the positionality that others might hold. So let's just talk quickly about these typologies, and we're not going to go too deep into them, but I do want to sort of summarize them quickly, and then there'll be some discussion about this. Personal and cultural knowledge is what you acquire from your home. It is the personal experiences that you gain at your home. Popular knowledge refers to the facts and beliefs and various character and plot types that you get from television, movies, popular culture, right? You hear music, you watch a movie, all the things that kind of happen in popular culture, that feeds into your understanding of knowledge. Mainstream academic knowledge is, again, this is stuff like, we know gravity exists. You may not know really how gravity works or what it all is, but you know it exists. Or you may have sort of a general understanding of space and the planets or whatever. You have like general knowledge they would kind of all have. That's the mainstream academic knowledge. And then the social knowledge refers to like the facts and concepts presented in textbooks and sort of their workbooks that kind of supplement the formal curriculum. Again, that's socially constructed knowledge. And then finally, this transformative academic knowledge is what I really want us to focus on, because this is what, the first four are all continuing the social construct, the social messaging of the day. But the transformative knowledge, the transformative academic knowledge pushes against those. So if school knowledge and mainstream knowledge are pushing us one way, transformative knowledge is going to push us another way and try to push against that current of mainstream school knowledge so that we can question it and we can grow into it. So these 5 things we can talk more about as we go, but the purpose of this class, my goal for you, is that you really begin to embrace transformative academic knowledge as it transforms us into critical thinkers. So here are the discussion questions. Again, I will make an assignment page, a discussion thread. I will put these on a document in Schoolology with an explanation to the assignment, but these are the discussion questions that will go up for this lecture. And so anyway, as always, if you've had questions or you have comments, please email me, let me know, and we do some clarification. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe and staying healthy. Peace.